Howdy everybody, this is Omar, your audio amigo, here today with another episode of Thrifty Tunes for you. Today we're going to be doing an Angelears collaboration IEM, this time with KZ. This little guy is the KZ X Angelears Libra X. It is the third version of the Libra IEM after they released the balanced and the high resolution versions. This, as you can see, is a single DD set priced at $15, but this always seems to be on sale for less than that. KZ has been kind of on a roll lately, so I'm kind of looking forward to this. Let's check it out. Before we get started, quick disclaimer. This Libra X here was sent to me by Angelears for review. I am not being paid for this review, but because I could turn around and sell this if I wanted to, I've gone ahead and activated the paid promotion feature here on YouTube. I do these disclaimers because I believe in full transparency when there's potential bias besides my own personal tastes at play. Thank you so much to Angelears for sending me this set for review, and thank you all for your continued support. We start, as always, with the unboxing experience, and as you would expect from a ultra-budget KZ set, the packaging is extremely minimal. But at this price point, I honestly appreciate it. Inside the box, you find the IEMs in their little plastic tray. Underneath, you get the silver version of the standard KZ cable, and a set of clear silicone KZ Starline tips. One thing I did notice is compared to the normal Starline tips, these have, I believe, a shorter stem than normal. So these aren't your standard KZ Starline tips. You can see by how they're sitting in my tip carrier here. Yeah, and that's it. Considering this is a $15 set, this level of accessories is perfectly acceptable in my eyes. I expect exactly this. Moving on to the cable. My opinions on the KZ stock cables are well documented, but I actually think it's perfectly at home here on the Libra X, and I think the color actually matches rather well. When you compare this cable with other cables sort of at this price range, I think that this cable fits right in line. For those who aren't familiar with the KZ, silver Tagliatelle cable, let's do a quick tour. It's a flat 2-wire cable that splits into individual wires at the Y-split. The 3.5mm is see-through and has a, see if we can see it, a KZ logo, there you go, embedded into the end there, which I really appreciate. There is no chin slider here because this cable is available with a microphone. I do not have the microphone version here. The QDC connectors here are also see-through. I do wish there was some red or blue indicators as to left and right, but they are... is that on this side? Is that on this side? The left and right indicators, there you go, are sort of cut into the surface of the QDC connector. The cable does have memory to it. It's one of my least favorite things about this cable, and it does misbehave, and it's quite difficult to wrap. But like I said, cables of this type at this price point are standard, and I think it's right at home on the Libra X considering how much it costs. Let's see, are you going to stay? No, you're not. Okay, gave the cable a talking to. Let's talk about how these are constructed. These are very small, very light shells, and they're built about how I expect a traditional budget IEM to be built. This is injected molded resin shells with a bit of metal on the faceplate for a little pizzazz. The nozzles are part of the casting for the lower shell and feature a fine mesh filter sort of inlaid into them. You can see into the driver there. As far as ventilation goes, you've got 2 vent holes on the ventral side of the IEM. You've got one right above the driver, and you've got the other one sort of there leading into the rear volume. There are also a few vent holes cut into the metal faceplate portion here on the faceplate of the IEM. These are actual vents. There's not any structure behind them. You can see through them if you look sort of in the corner of the IEM there. I can't really get it on camera, but trust me, they're real actual vents. I personally like clear shells like this, and while these don't feel like the most solid IEMs in the world, they're very lightweight and they feel a bit cheap. They are cheap, so considering the price, I think these are actually quite well built. Okay, time for specs. The Libra X here is a pretty typical little budget IEM. Single 10mm dynamic, low impedance, high sensitivity, means no issues powering these with old cassette Walkmans, Minidisc players, phones, tablets, whatever you may have. I like it when budget IEMs don't require you to go out and buy a dongle, which is always nice. These are also, as I mentioned, some of the lightest shells in my collection, which is nice for sort of long-term comfort. These also have the second slimmest nozzles in my collection, which, again, really good for comfort. Overall, these are very basic. These are small, light, easy to power, and extremely basic budget IEMs. Nothing really stands out here in terms of specs. So let's talk about the cool wall. While the clear plastic and exposed driver, looks really cool and awesome to a 90s kid like me, I feel like the overall faceplate design is lacking a little bit of wow factor, and I think it could use a bit more pizzazz. Maybe a little bit of color wouldn't have gone amiss. I also think smoking the resin would have been a good step. While these aren't amazing, these aren't bland looking either. Like I said, some color would have really livened these up. I'm going to go ahead and stick them in bland because they're sort of neutral and plain looking. I'm not expecting these to do well with the Council of Ladies. Let's go ahead and check in with them and see what they have to say. Okay, this is a bit surprising. 3 of our ladies actually think these are pretty versus not pretty, so there you go. That goes to show what I know about fashion. Only one of these ladies would compliment you on these if you were wearing them in public, though, so maybe I'm not too far off. Lastly, let's go ahead and look at their thoughts. Magic Illusion is a new one. I haven't seen that one said yet. I take offense to the outdated 90s tech remark. 90s tech is not outdated, it's classic. But overall, it seems like a pretty positive reaction. So, goes to show what I know. Well done, KZ, making these interesting looking. Let's chat about comfort for a bit. Like with the Canera Celeste Rue, it's super easy for me to talk about comfort. These are tiny, they weigh nothing, the nozzles are really, really small. They feel like there's nothing actually in my ears. As long as I have the right ear tips on these, I could wear these all day, no problem. As far as my wife and her tiny ears test goes, these didn't do as well as I was expecting, especially considering they're pretty similar to the Rue in overall shape and size. Something about the angle that the nozzle takes on the shells here, combined with the shape of the ear hooks, meant that these weren't as comfortable for her as I was expecting. They did end up passing the tiny ears test, but she said she would only be able to wear these for a couple of hours at most, so these get a conditional pass. Let's talk about how the Libra X sounds with music, kicking things off as usual with the bass. The Libra doesn't have what I would call a thumpy or punchy bass presentation. It is accurate, it is tight, and the sub-bass extension on this is actually really well done. But bass is clearly not the focus of this tuning here. The low buzzing and the droning sub-bass notes in Massive Attack's Angel, for example, are all there and present, and they sound accurate and well rendered. They just don't have the energy that I or some other folks will want them to have in that replay. Bass guitars and kick drums are a similar story. The big kick drum that punctuates Earth, Wind & Fire's Let's Groove is definitely in the mix, and it doesn't get drowned out, but it may not have the impact that you might want it to have if you're used to a bassier headphone or some modern car audio systems. Overall, the bass is accurate, it's tight, and most importantly, I feel like it does what the mix or the mastering is asking it to do. It isn't pushed back, it isn't pushed forward. I feel like it's just natural, neutral bass presence here on the Libra X. So, since the bass isn't boosted and is actually quite neutral, the mids benefit and come across as very clean and very clear. There's no real tonal impact from the bass since there isn't much of a boost going on. Cream's White Room is an absolutely great replay on these. The distortion on the guitar as well as the bass and drums are all well rendered. I don't feel like there's any masking. There's no instrument covering up another one. Separating the instruments from each other is pretty easy to do. I think it's a good overall performance here. Jack Bruce's vocals also sound very correct. There's no additional warmth or husk from the bass, and there's no shrillness from any overdone treble. As far as female vocals go, it's a similar story. Cyndi Lauper's excitable vocals in The Goonies Are Good Enough from the Goonies soundtrack sounds really great on these. Again, there's no husk or warm tonality imparted on the vocals from the bass, and the Libra actually is quite vocal forward. I kind of like it. I don't find it to be too intense or shouty. I think it's just a good balance of a vocal forward set. Overall, the mid-range is very clean, accurate, and like I said, surprisingly forward with those female vocals. I kind of dig it. Next up, we have the upper mids and the treble. The female vocal focus is going to continue in the form of female vocal harmonics. Y'all know I like to use Claris's Hitori Goto to test harmonics, specifically at the beginning of the second verse where they're sort of singing in a harmony and they throw out some over and subtones with their voices crashing into each other. The Libra X does a very good job with those, and I feel like the vibrato and their sustained notes over the rest of the track is also rendered very well here. The decay isn't super fast, it isn't super long, it's just right. Overall, female vocals are really, really nice here, especially considering how much this costs. In terms of percussion harmonics, they're also more forward and emphasized. The hi-hats in Genesis's That's All have a good sharpness and energy to them, has that little bit of extra sparkle that has them stand out from the rest of the mix. The tambourine also has a bit of emphasis. People who love the extra energy up here will really like it, but if you're treble sensitive, I wouldn't really recommend this set. There's quite a bit of energy up here, making this set have a definite brighter tilt to it. The upper mids and treble, while they are very energetic, I feel are actually quite well done overall. As far as technicalities go, the Libra X did pass my Steely Dan Black Cow echo test. It was a little less pronounced than I typically like, but the echo/reverb from the bass guitar was there, and it carried, the detail that I was expecting to hear in it. So it gets a pass. As we move up in the range, the brighter tuning pushes details more forward than I would expect. The finale to Respighi's Pines of Rome, for example, I'm able to hear that little triangle going to town amidst all the horns, strings, percussion, everybody going to town, despite the fact that it's, placed further back in the mix. At the top end, I feel like this set has quite nice detail retrieval. I would put it above the ultra budget sets like the EDX Lite, and maybe just a smidge above the EDC Pro in terms of overall details, but that's mostly down to the tuning and not the driver. Another thing the Libra does pretty well is stereo separation. Mediterranean Sundance has both guitarists in each ear with no real feeling of claustrophobia, no closed-in nature to the sound. The audience has plenty of room to sound alive. Really good separation here. In terms of perceived 3D soundstage, the Libra's tuning means that it won't hold back really well-mastered tracks. Hiroshima's Sansei is a good example. You have a koto, a taiko drum, the guitars, the bass, the shamisen, and keyboards all coming from sort of different locations around you in the mix, and it's a lot of fun to just sit there and figure out which direction which instruments are coming from as they come in and out of the track. Great song, by the way, go check it out. Overall, I feel like the Libra X is slightly above average for IEMs at its price point, especially when it comes to stereo separation and perceived 3D soundstage. Okay, time for some comparisons. The Libra X here is what I would describe as a sort of bright, neutral-ish tuning, so it doesn't really compete with some of the more V-shaped IEMs in the price range like the EDC Pro or the CCA CRA. It's also not warm like the Celeste Rouet or the ND Venus. But I've lined up some things that I think this does compete with or sound vaguely like, so let's go ahead and jump into the comparisons. Go ahead and kick things off with the Moondrop Quark 2, priced at $17. These two are quite similar, but there's a few key differences here. The Libra X, I feel, has better overall bass texture, probably due to the fact that this is a 10mm and this is a 6mm, but I can't say that for sure. The Libra X are also a little more vocal forward than the Quark 2. Outside of that, though, these two are quite similar in terms of overall tonality. The biggest difference here is going to be the form factor and the cables. The Quark 2 is a USB C DSP IEM, therefore the cable is permanently attached. I already wasn't the biggest fan of the Quark 2 because I felt like it's a very niche product for people who A, want bullet-style IEMs, and B, do most of their listening on a phone with no dongle. And between these two overall, for $2 less, I feel like the Libra is just an overall better value. Next up is the first set I thought of when I first sat down and started doing my first impressions listening on this. I said to myself, this sounds kind of like the 7Hz Soundnote Zero, priced at $20. And yeah, I feel like in terms of overall tuning, these two are, again, super similar. There are a couple of differences. I feel like the Zero are a bit brighter and a bit more resolving, if I'm honest, compared to the Libra. The Libra, however, have that more forward female vocal presentation, and I feel they have a little bit more magic in that compared to the original Zeros. Both of these cables are not what I would call great or good, for that matter. I do think that the shells on the Zero are a bit more solidly built than the ones on the Libra, but these are $5 more at MSRP. So if you're really pinching pennies, I think the Libra could be a great budget alternative to the Zero, especially if the Libra are on sale and these are not. Speaking of that sort of vocal forward nature of the Libra X, it made me pull out the Tangzu Wan'Er original, priced at, again, $20. Y'all know that I think that the original Wan'Er, the party piece for this, is what it's capable of doing with female vocals. And honestly, the Libra approaches that pretty darn closely, in all honesty. I would say you could describe the Libra X as a less bassy, sort of brighter overall Wan'Er. If you love the Wan'Er specifically for the female vocals and felt that it was maybe a bit too bassy and lacking in some of that top-end detail, this is a fantastic alternative to that, and it's cheaper. I do feel the Wan'Er is better overall. The cable is better. I feel like the bass on the Wan'Er is much better. But the Libra X is a sort of alternative way to approach a budget female vocal focused set compared to the Wan'Er. Finally, we have the Truthear Gate, representing the sort of neutral-ish tunings between $18 and $20 in this price range. So I pulled out the Gate to represent the Gate, the SimGot EW100P, and the Tangzu Wan'Er Studio Edition, as I feel that those three are like the neutral-ish trio at this price point. The Libra X actually fits in rather well with this trio. The biggest difference is, again, the female vocals, which are more forward on the Libra X, and the bass, which is much less emphasized compared to the other three. In terms of overall treble energy, the Libra X honestly hangs in there with the other three in terms of sort of sparkle and shininess at the top end. But the leaner bass on the Libra lends it to have an overall brighter tonality compared to the other ones. It sounds a bit less neutral, in my opinion, compared to those three. Overall, I still think the Libra is overall much closer in terms of tonality to the Zero than it is to the three I just mentioned. Alrighty, let's go ahead and sum things up. In terms of technicalities and detail resolution, I think the Libra X sits a bit above the Quark 2 and just below the Zero. It's got a more traditional build with a removable cable and that sort of bean-shaped over-the-ear hook compared to the Quark. It's also got more of that female vocal focus I keep talking about when compared to basically everything here, including the Zero. Compared to the Wan'Er and the neutral-ish trio, it is lacking in bass, but it keeps up with the trio in terms of treble. And while this, in my opinion, doesn't keep up with, these in terms of overall detail retrieval, it's pretty close, especially considering that, for $5 less and $2 less here, this is, basically the cheapest IEM on the table. Okay, so enough comparisons. Let's go ahead and see where the KZX Angelears Libra X will land on the Audio Amigo Arbitrary rating scale. I personally think KZ is on a bit of a roll, at least in the sets that I've been getting for review. The Libra is essentially a more vocal forward version of the 7Hz Zero for $5 less. No, it isn't built as well, and I do feel that the Zero is better in terms of overall detail resolution, but is it worth, 25% more money? It depends entirely on your financial situation. Only you're going to be able to make that call. I feel like just like we're seeing some $1,000 tunings start to trickle down into the $300 to $500 range, we're starting to see tunings in the $20 to $30 range slowly start to filter down to the $15 and under budget range. The ND Venus is a budget QKZX HPB. The EDC Pro is kind of sort of a budget 02, and now we have the Libra X. It's a kind of sort of budget original Zero. For $15, I think this is a pretty great little budget IEM. It isn't perfect, but at this price range, I really don't expect it to be. I think it's surprisingly solid with a pretty mature tuning for the amount of money you're being asked to pay. Sure, the build quality and the driver might not be up to the standards of, the $25 IEM class, but I also feel like it's not really competing with the $25 IEM class. I'm going to go ahead and stick this with the EDC Pro in the but I like this tier, because while I think it's a good IEM for $15, I think that it can be even more fantastic if you can get this on a discount. And like KZ is known to do, the price on these is already tumbling down. So, do I recommend the KZX Angelears Libra? Yeah, I think it's a good little IEM. This won't be for everyone, however. This is not for people who want a thumpy, energetic bass presentation. It also isn't for people who are treble sensitive, as I think that the energy in the upper mids and treble is going to be a deal breaker for those people. I also don't think that this is people with higher budgets. If you have $20 or more to spend, there are other sets with similar sound profiles that have a more solid build and a better accessories package. That said, if you are a very budget-constricted buyer, then I feel like these fill a pretty nice niche, especially when they're on sale like they have been for the last several weeks. At time of writing, I can get a brand new set of Libra X from AliExpress for $5 with a new customer special. $5, this is an absolutely insane deal in my opinion, and at $5, I can recommend them to basically anyone who just wants a good, slightly bright-sounding beater set. Yeah, it's fantastic for that. At a more normal sale price, though, these are essentially for folks who want to try out the 7Hz Zero but don't have the budget for it. These are essentially the EDC Pro's brighter, more neutral-sounding sister, and I think if you can pick both the EDC Pro and the Libra X up for together under $15, it'll give you a great idea of what sort of sound signature you might prefer moving up in the price bracket. Do you like something V-shaped, or do you like something brighter or more neutral-ish? You know what? Heck, if you can get the ND Venus, this, and the EDC Pro all for under $20, you can have a nice little sampler pack of basically 3 of the most common tunings to try out in the hobby and get started and figure out what you like. Then you can sort of save up for a more expensive version of the one that you like the most. But that's going to wrap this one up. Another really good $15 IEM from KZ. As I said earlier, I think KZ's kind of on the roll. I feel like these budget value sets are sort of what they do best. Their deep discounting policy makes them very attractive to new buyers, and as I keep saying, a competitive KZ that's putting out good products is good for the industry because, like it or not, they're sort of the ambassador for people who are new to the hobby and just coming in for the first time. But that's it for now. I appreciate all your continued support. Thanks again to Angelears for sending these out for review. This has been Omar with Audio Amigo Reviews, and I will catch y'all next time.